Today we're going to be discussing marking methods for the mole salamanders. Compared to any other animal on the planet, amphibians have the most number of species that are at risk of extinction. The red bars on the graph show the critically endangered species, while the orange bar on the graph shows the endangered species. And as you can see, compared to any other animal, the amphibians have the most number of species that are at risk of extinction. This is why it is important to have management practices and conservation efforts that are the most effective for helping these species, while at the same time making sure our data collection efforts cause the least amount of harm. An important aspect to data collection is properly marking and identifying animals. There are several methods that are currently being used, but only one that should be implemented for the future. Toe clipping is currently the most common method for marking mole salamanders. The reason why is it's fast, cheap, and easy to do. It can be done without the use of heavy or bulky equipment, and it also provides additional DNA samples. The figure on the right shows how you can have different combinations of numbers by using the different digits. Although toe clipping is beneficial and useful, it does have some drawbacks. Mainly, the return rate. The more toes you clip, the more directly it affects the return rate of the individual. Also, it affects survivability. The more toes clipped, the less likely the individual is to survive. This is partly due to the lack of ability to capture food and also partly due to the risk of infection. Another common method for marking mole salamanders is visible implant elastometer. This is a method where the animal is injected with a colored polymer so the individual can be marked based on the color combination. Visible implant elastometer is great because it can be seen from a distance, it has almost perfect mark retention, and it has very minimal effects on the animals, plus it can be used on both large and small individuals. However, it does cause high levels of stress that's similar to that has been seen in toe clippings. It does cost a lot of money, and the polymer can become unusable if it gets too hot, so it does limit the field applications of it. Also, there are only 10 colors available, so it is not ideal for studies where you need a very large sample size. Another well-known method for marking mole salamanders is passive integrated transponder tags, or PIT tags. This is not as common as the other two methods, but it is still used today. This method causes high levels of stress to the animal because the animal needs to be anesthetized in order for the device to be inserted into their skin. Also, because they have to be anesthetized, this leaves them vulnerable to predation and desiccation while they are recovering from this. This method is also more expensive than the previous two methods that I have mentioned. Also, it affects the recapture rate, and it does have a size limit on the individual that can be marked because of the size of the tag. It also requires an experienced field worker, so that way it does not affect the survivorship of the individual. However, it does make these animals easier to find because you don't need direct line of sight. You can use a receiver to find the transponder. The last method I'd like to talk about is photo identification method. This is done by taking pictures of each salamander and putting it into a computer program. The computer program then takes the patterns of each skin and makes a photo identification for each specimen. Picture A is two pictures of two different salamanders, and the computer can clearly tell the distinction between the two skin patterns. Picture B is two pictures of the same salamander, but they were taken a year apart, and even though the skin pattern has changed slightly, the computer is able to make a 100% identification match. This method is extremely beneficial because it leaves no permanent mark or injury on the animal, and it's extremely accurate, and it has a least amount of influence on the animal's behavior because it minimalizes stress. The major downside to this is that it costs a lot for the camera equipment, it takes a lot of data to store all these photos, and it takes a good amount of time for the computer to run through all these pictures and make a positive ID. Also, the photos need to be updated every so often so that way the computer has accurate skin patterns for every specimen. It is my recommendation that photo identification markers are the primary method for marking mole salamanders and should be adapted in all studies. This is the best way to capture the most amount of data with causing the least amount of stress or harm to the individual. Thanks for listening, and I hope you were able to learn something and I accurately explained the importance for needing photo identification markers. This is my references that I used for all the information that I gave. The 3 that I used the most, I went ahead and put in bold. If you had any questions, please feel free to reach out in the comments, and thank you again for your time.